Hello everybody, my name is Nick Hodges and I thought it'd be fun to give you my impressions of the Dunkirk trailers. But first, may I just say how awesome it is to see the hype for this movie. I mean, how often do we see a historical film headlining as a summer blockbuster? Especially when competing against our usual array of superhero movies and franchise projects. A big reason, of course, is because the director of Dunkirk, Christopher Nolan, gave us the greatest superhero movie of all. As a result, his name has just as much drawing power for audiences as the Dark Knight himself. But you know what? If that gets more bums in seats to watch a historical film, then I'm all for it. Especially when that movie concerns such an important moment in history that your average movie-going audience is mostly unaware of. Now, of course, since Dunkirk hasn't come out yet, I cannot possibly tell you how accurate it is. So what I like to do instead is to point out what I hope to see in the final film based on what actually happened. The possible exclusion of these moments and events may not ruin the movie for me per se, but I feel that they would go a long way in painting a bigger picture for the audience and help show why Dunkirk was one of the defining moments of the Second World War. But before we do that, let me give you a quick summary of what the movie's actually about. As we all know, the official start of the Second World War began with the German invasion of Poland. Just a few days later, on the 3rd of September 1939, Great Britain and France declared war on Germany. But despite this serious level of commitment by both allies, there was an 8-month period of relative inactivity on the Western Front. No substantial effort was made to liberate Poland in the first weeks of the war, resulting in its fall. And then again in April 1940, the Allies were unable to stop the German conquest of Norway and Denmark. This period was known as the Phony War, called as such by the Allied armies as they dug into defensive positions across the Maginot Line, their commanders still thinking tactically that they were fighting the previous war, waiting for the enemy to attack first. But in the process, the Germans were given the initiative and precious time to wage a new kind of war, Blitzkrieg, Lightning War. On the 10th of May 1940, the Germans smashed through the Allied lines with dense concentrations of armoured and infantry personnel, followed by dive bombers providing close air support. The Allies were taken completely by surprise and retreated. Within weeks they were surrounded, with their backs up against the French coast. Outflanked and cut off from their supplies in Normandy, 400,000 Allied troops would now have to evacuate through the harbour of Dunkirk and along 27 miles of beaches up to Ostend in Belgium. And this is pretty much what the movie will be about, and you could see a lot of what I mentioned shown in the trailers. When it finally comes out in the cinema, I'm interested to find out which version of history will be presented on screen. Will it be the one focusing heavily on that famous Dunkirk spirit? How the British public pulled together in its darkest hour to rescue its trapped armies from the jaws of certain defeat? Or will the film take a bleaker approach, highlighting key military blunders made by the High Command and also show just how chaotic this evacuation really was? In the early stages, there was drunkenness, looting, insubordination, and even desertion. This, of course, doesn't reflect on every soldier. Given the extraordinary circumstances, most behaved admirably. But there were examples of indiscipline. Personally, I like to see a balance of both. On one hand, it was a colossal military disaster, but at the same time, it's wrong to dismiss the amazing achievements that successfully saved hundreds of thousands of lives. I'm also curious to see the role in which the RAF will play in this movie. Historically, they've been strongly criticised for not doing enough to protect the men trapped on those beaches, often by the very soldiers those pilots were trying to protect.
Where's the bloody Air Force?
It would be interesting to see these allegations met head-on and get a balanced perspective. It's true that many of the RAF pilots were young, eager, and inexperienced, but they were also outnumbered and faced battle-hardened veterans of the Luftwaffe, German pilots who had flown in the Spanish Civil War, who had fought in Poland and Scandinavia, who were now gunning for them. It was indeed a trial by fire, but it would prepare them later for the most important battle the RAF would ever face, the Battle of Britain. But as important as seeing the evacuation in Dunkirk, I also hope that the film shows what was going on in the home front, particularly in Downing Street and the War Office. Consider this: Winston Churchill only became the Prime Minister 16 days before the evacuation began. He is witnessing the fall of France and quite possibly the fall of Europe. He is within a hair's breadth of losing his entire army and his ability to keep Great Britain in the fight. Not only does he have to worry about that, but he faces strong political opposition, both within his cabinet and without. You have the American ambassador in England, Joseph Kennedy, the father of future US President John F. Kennedy. This guy hated the British and was vocally dismissive of their chances of survival. A man who in Britain's darkest hour would strongly argue against America providing military and economic aid. You also have Lord Halifax, the man who could have been Prime Minister, who labelled Churchill as a warmonger and strongly pushed for appeasement and brokering a peace with the Germans. The inclusion of one or both historical figures would help show what was at stake, at least in my opinion. But if you had to ask me what I hope to see most in the upcoming film Dunkirk, and that is the crucial 40,000-man French rearguard who stayed behind and defended Dunkirk's perimeter, buying time for the evacuation. They didn't leave their posts until the last boats had left. They are heroes in every sense of the word, and their story deserves to be told. So that covers all the biggest things I hope to see in Dunkirk. I hope you enjoyed this video, and you're just as excited as I am when it comes out. Now I'm going to crack on with researching my next review. I'm going to take a little bit of a break from World War II stuff, but in the meantime, here's a little teaser for you.